Tense is one of the most confusing parts of language. For people learning English, tense is one of the biggest challenges because English does tense in a way that's very different from lots of other languages. But the way English uses tense is actually logical and consistent, even though sometimes it doesn't seem to be. At the English Language Club, we have 3 key ideas to help you learn tense. And if you learn these rules, you will know how to understand English tenses. If you really want to improve your English, then make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss future videos. Also, stay tuned at the end of this video because we've written a course called Inside English, which is designed to help you make tense make sense. There are a lot of things that make tenses seem complicated, like rules and exceptions and irregular verbs. But underneath all of that, there is a logic, and that is what we focus on in Inside English. So keep watching for more about that. But for now, let's get back to the video. Tense is the way that we communicate the when of an action. It answers the question, when does the action happen? Well, that sounds really simple, doesn't it? Must be either in the past, the present, or the future. But not all actions have a simple answer to the question, when does the action happen? For example, think of the verb live. When do you live? Or when does someone else live? For somebody from history, the answer to this question is easy. They lived in the past. For yourself, you might think the answer is just as easy. You could say, I'm living right now. But that's not the only way that you can use the verb live. Look at this sentence. Marcy lives in London. But when did Marcy start living in London? When did she finish living in London? What if the beginning of the action is in the past, but the end of the action is in the present or the future? So you can see that when an action happens isn't always so simple. Fortunately, there is a very easy way to know how to understand English tense. The trick is that instead of just asking when an action happens, past, present or future, we also need to ask what type of action it is. There are 3 types of action: simple, continuous and perfect. The time of action tells us what time we're talking about, a moment that's either in the past, the present or the future. The type of action tells us about when the action starts and finishes. So with these 3 times of action and these 3 types of action, we can make the 9 main tenses: past simple, present simple, future simple, past continuous, present continuous, and future continuous, past perfect, present perfect, and future perfect. There are actually 3 more tenses because tenses can be both perfect and continuous at the same time. So we also have the past perfect continuous, present perfect continuous, and the future perfect continuous. We're not going to worry too much about those 3 now. They work in a similar way, so they follow the same logic, but they're more complicated because they're like 2 tenses merged into one. But we will look at them in more detail in future videos because it will be easier to understand them later when we know how to understand English tense and have looked in more detail at the other 9 tenses. Other teachers and courses normally start with the simple tenses, but at the English Language Club, we like to look at the continuous tenses first. The reason that simple is called simple is not because it's easy. In fact, there are more irregularities with the simple tenses than there are with the continuous and perfect. So it actually makes a lot more sense if we do it last. So we're going to come back to it. Looking at the continuous tenses, we'll start with an example. You are watching this video. We can see on this timeline that we are talking about the present. So the time of action is present. You started watching this video in the past, and it will stop in the future. So the action takes place in the past, present, and future. But at the time we're talking about, the present, it's in the middle of happening. So the type of action here is continuous. This is the present continuous tense. You are watching this video. In the past continuous, we would say you were watching this video. The time of action is in the past, but it started even further in the past. It can finish in the past, the present, or even in the future, but the point is that since the time of action that we're talking about is past, we're saying that the action was in the middle of happening at that point in the past. It's similar when the time of action is future. We would say that you will be watching this video. A continuous action that may have started in the past, the present, or the future, it doesn't matter as long as it began before the future time that we're talking about. And it will finish even further into the future. So during that time of action in the future, the action is in the middle of happening. So the continuous type of action tells us that the action is in the middle of happening at the time that we're talking about. Now let's look at the perfect tenses. The perfect tenses are the most difficult to explain. For now, let's keep it simple. You can think of perfect tenses as finished. The perfect type of action is an action that's finished. So, how does this help us to answer the question, when does the action happen? If an action is finished, then it must have started sometime before. And it must also have already stopped because it's finished. It could have stopped a long time before, or it may have stopped recently. That's not important. The important thing is that it stopped before the time we're talking about, before the time of action. In the present perfect tense, we're talking about an action that's finished in the present. For example, you might tell someone, I have eaten. The action of eating happened in the past, but now in the present it's finished. So even though the action happened in the past, we're talking about the result, or the fact that now in the present it's finished. In the past perfect tense, we're talking about an action that was finished by a certain point in the past. For example, I had eaten. At some point, even further in the past, I ate. By the time I'm talking about, still in the past, the action had already finished. In the future perfect, I will have eaten. We're talking about a time in the future when an action is finished. It could have started either in the past, the present, or earlier in the future. It doesn't matter, because our focus is on that specific point of time in the future. So the important thing is that by that time, the action has already finished. The best tip for how to understand perfect tenses is that they refer to an action being already finished at the point of time that you're talking about. The perfect tenses are the most confusing and difficult to use because they are used in so many different ways. You could use it to talk about experience that happened in your life or historical events that may have happened many years ago. Or you can use it to talk about very defined time periods like this morning or today. We also use it a lot with words like just, already, and yet. But when you strip away all the layers that make it complicated, this is the core truth at the heart of it. The time of action, past, present, or future, is not when the action happened, but it's a later time that the action has an effect on. You're not really talking about the action of the verb itself, but the effect of the verb on the time that you're talking about. So now we can talk about the simple tenses. As we saw with the continuous and the perfect type of action, the types of action give us more information about when the action of the verb starts and finishes. With continuous, it starts before the time of action and ends after. With the perfect, it starts and finishes before the time of action. The simple tenses are simple not because they're easy, but because they don't tell you anything about when the action starts or finishes. We're just talking about the action as a whole. You still might be talking about an action that's ongoing or finished, but when you use the simple type of action, you're saying that something is generally true at the time you're talking about. You aren't making a point about when the action starts or stops, other than saying that it's past, present, or future. For example, in the present simple, you could say, I live in London. By using the simple type of action, it's not important exactly when the action starts or stops. We're just saying that it's true now, in the present. The idea is the same for the past simple, I lived in London. Exactly when it started or finished is not important, only that it happened in the past. And in the future simple, I will live in London. It doesn't matter exactly when. In this case, it may be unknown. We're not focusing on that. We're just saying that in the future, it will happen. The key idea is that we use simple tenses when we aren't trying to say anything about an action being in the middle of happening or already finished. We're just saying that it's generally true at the time of action. So, there you have it. If you want to know how to understand English tense, you need to know that there are 3 times of action, past, present, and future, and 3 types of action, simple, continuous, and perfect. And then together they form the 9 basic tenses and the 3 more advanced tenses. Every tense in English is a combination of a time of action and a type of action. The time of action tells us what time we're talking about, and the type of action gives us information about when the action of the verb starts and finishes. Understanding the time of action and type of action will help you to know how to understand English tense. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments, do you find tenses difficult in English? And what tenses do you think are the most difficult? We've written a course called Inside English, and it goes a little bit deeper into these ideas and focuses on helping you make sense of tense. We've noticed that when learning about tenses, students often get overwhelmed because there are a lot of things that make tense seem complicated. But there really is a logic to English. And in order to find it, you have to forget about the exceptions and the dozens of little rules and focus on the basic principles of how it really works. English tenses are often taught as a list of rules to memorize. And when you learn English this way, you quickly get overwhelmed and bored and confused by all the exceptions and the irregularities. So this is actually a really terrible way to understand English, because it makes it difficult to understand how the language actually works. But there is a logic to English, and in this course, that is what we focus on. This course is designed for anyone hoping to improve their English with a particular focus on really understanding the tenses, how they're formed and when to use them. By the end of the course, you'll be able to speak English more comfortably because you understand what each tense means. And you'll instinctively use each tense with the correct form because you'll understand the key ideas of how tenses work. Instead of getting distracted and confused by the things that make tenses seem complicated, we will stay focused on the things that make tense make sense. We've identified 3 key ideas which are often not clearly taught, but they're actually really important. Then we'll look at the main tenses and we'll see how these key ideas apply to all of them without exceptions. So you can be sure that you will use what you've learned every time you speak English. You'll have seen a lot of the content in our free videos like this one, but if you sign up to the course, you'll get all that content delivered within a structure that will systematically help you build on what you already know. You'll also get interactive exercises so you can test yourself and help to retain what you've learned. If you sign up to the course, you'll also obviously help us, so it's a great way that you can support the English Language Club so that we can put out more content in the future. The ideal student for this course is someone who speaks English but gets confused by irregular verbs or lacks confidence because there are too many rules and exceptions to those rules. And because of this, it feels like there's too much to learn. It's not for complete beginners, but anyone who has a pre-intermediate right up to native speakers will find that inside English helps to make tense make sense. If you want to know more, then use the link in the description to find out how to sign up. Or you can check out some of our other videos, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.